Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to episode 3 of P2 India Mutual Fund presents Live Mint, Amend, Adjust and Adapt. This is a series of high-powered virtual panel discussions where we unravel the success mantras for the new normal and try and look at what the roadmap should be for us in a post-COVID world. I know post-COVID world doesn't seem to be appearing anywhere in the immediate future. We're seeing the number of cases that are still rising. But it's good to spend this time trying to figure out what needs to be done for India and for the world as we finally emerge from COVID. Now, I'm Vikram Chandra, I'm the founder of Veritagy. Today, we're going to be looking at the topic of policy and reforms. But on the impact of COVID, we are seeing the Reserve Bank of India, for example, talking about perhaps a 4% drop in GDP. Could be an 8% drop in GDP. Those are scary numbers. When you're looking at the landscape out there, how bad is it looking to you? How bad do you think the numbers actually will be?
This time, at the COVID pandemic has led to already a fall in global decline of over 6.5%. So the world has actually seen a wiping out of about 16 trillion of the global economy. 16 trillion of the global. This is the size and scale of the impact of the pandemic, and therefore India is going to have an impact in a very big way. There's no mincing word about it. India will be impacted by this. But what India's done is, by a series of reforms in the days to come and by a series of measures of both fiscal and monetary policy, it is merely trying to ensure that its companies and its MSMEs and its agriculture sector stands, is in the days to come, is able to withstand this huge shock which both the world and India has seen. And that has been the attempt through both, the vast series of measures which the RBI took and this vast number of reforms which the government announced through the Atmanirbhar package. So my personal view is that we should, this year will maybe bad, but I think we should be able to bounce back next year on account of these measures.
Mr. Deepak, I don't want to come to, we've heard lots of specific reforms and let's look at the reforms that are required in individual areas. But I want to come to you with a couple of overall points on which I am not completely sure that we've answered the question on a fundamental change that India needs to make when it comes to ease of doing business. About 20 years, I went to Davos virtually every year. And every single person whom I used to meet to among CEOs used to say, what worries us about India is not the market or the laws or the possibility of making profits of any of that. What really worries us is the possibility of something happening that you can't plan for or prepare for, which is policy flip-flops, changes that will happen, retrospective tax that will come.
Long-term stable policies which give certainty and predictability to investors is obviously something which investment is looking for. And one of the major areas which India needs is large volumes of investment. We're talking about the stock markets. Stock markets and FII inflows is basically hot money. There's liquidity, regulators are putting in money, central banks are giving stimuli. So money is flowing in, and wherever the yield is good, they are coming in, but it'll go off. We need to make sure that we get investment in the real economy, the infrastructure, especially digital infrastructure in areas like making our export sector competitive. And these two areas basically, which is, I believe, the low-hanging fruit. Now, unless we have forward-looking policies, and we've done a lot in improving the ease of doing business, but it's not enough, because other countries are competitors, and people are catching up with us. Some are ahead of us. So we need to be in the race to give the best deal to the prospective investor.
This is an area which involves also the state governments. And we have seen in recent times how state governments have often reneged on their commitment and their responsibility towards national projects, or projects at least which are nationally important. We've seen that in the case of the Plavaram project. We've seen that in the case of the Amaravati capital region project and such like. All these, because you bring in an international company as your consultant, you bring in some international contractors. And I mean, I mentioned only 2 such projects, but I could mention several more, such as, for instance, the project for constructing an elevated highway from Madurai to Chennai port. Now, suddenly, because the government changes or some reason, you renege and you change the terms of the contract and scare away the contractor. All these convey the wrong signals, for which we have something called state support agreements. But those need to be relooked at to make them more strong and definitive. And these should be vetted by the cabinet, by the union cabinet. So if a state government tomorrow reneges on their commitment towards these things, then the central government can pick them up, and it's then a disobedience or a defiance of a central statute.
In March 2020, the banking sector has now a very healthy provision ratio. For example, our bank has a provisioning ratio around 85%, which is very healthy. But unfortunately, with the onset of the COVID, some of this could be set a little bit backward. It's good that yesterday there has been an announcement of the restructuring mechanism with defined signposts by the Reserve Bank of India, and with an incentivization that you need to restructure only those assets which are viable and not go after others. So I think that's a very good suggestion. And my sense is that banks currently are much well prepared to ride to the storm than they were in the earlier crisis.
So India's core advantage is availability of low-cost skilled workforce. I think 3 sectors that have really taken advantage of this and are already in the international market are software, chemicals, and pharma. So chemicals is a relatively new entrant. It is clearly building on the track record built by pharma sector, and also by the fact that the most multinationals are now looking for an alternative to China as a sourcing base, and I think we are taking advantage of that. But coming to doing everything or focusing on domestic manufacturing for, let's say, electronics or consumer goods and building global hubs, my interactions with the industry players suggest that I think there are even today quite a few hurdles. So if we can focus on manufacturing to take care of our requirements and reduce import dependency, I think that is good enough for the time being.
No, I don't want to understand that a little further, because that's a very interesting point that you made, that there are sectors in which India could have a major advantage, and done correctly, this could be the next wave of driving India. So let me just take up on some of the things that you said. Yeah, we all know about IT and pharma, that's been there and done that. The government seems to be hoping that we'll persuade Taiwanese and other companies to set up base out here, because everyone wants to de-risk away from China. So get them to come and set up a base out here and say, okay, make your phones out here, make cars here, make auto parts out here, and export. As you rightly said, that there are still hurdles that are there at the back of their minds. Perhaps if you could list some of those and some of the specific things that you think perhaps we should that we can try and do to remove those hurdles.
No, as I think some of the panelists have highlighted, so we are seeing more people getting interested in India to set up manufacturing, but they are still hesitant or cagey. Even if you see the labor reform that have been highlighted, they are saying that this will be there for 3 years or 5 years. You don't set up a manufacturing base, invest $2 billion, and don't know what will happen after 5 years.